Good morning, everyone. This is Tom Doran with Innovia Consulting. We appreciate everyone joining us today on a holiday weekend. Great turnout for our webinar, which just tells us that this is a topic that everyone's interested in, which is would your company pass a licensing audit? I'm joined today by Jeff Pergalski. He is a certified licensing specialist by Microsoft. Jeff works here with me at Innovia Consulting, and he's going to take us through some of the considerations that you should be thinking about as to what you can do to make sure that you will pass a licensing audit. So, Jeff, I'll turn it over to you. You take it away.
All right, thanks, Tom. Again, thanks everyone for joining us here in Neenah, Wisconsin. I work out of my home office. We've got a bunch of snow last night, so winter is finally here, and my kids have something to do on winter break besides staring at their phones or playing Xbox, so we're all thankful for that. So software asset management. SAM, as it is in the Microsoft world, is what we are talking about today. I'm guessing that based on interactions with our own customers, that people on the call today, we've got a fair mix of people who have already been through the process. Microsoft has really made this I don't know if focus is the right word, but compliance has become very important in the Microsoft world, starting in second quarter of 2013 and continuing forward. So lots of customers have got that email, that innocent-looking email from Microsoft saying, let's talk, and so we're here to just kind of share with you some information, some experience as to how we've helped customers and just kind of prepare you and maybe give you a peek behind the curtain, if you will, about what this process is like. In all cases, we have found Microsoft to be very fair when dealing with these compliance issues, but it is a software investment is a big part of everyone's business, and so we just want to make sure that we're doing our part as a Microsoft partner, helping people to understand this process and why compliance is so important. So with that, as Tom said, I am a jack of all trades here at Novia. I've got 15 active and 3 legacy Microsoft certifications, including that all-important TS 671, which is a licensing specialist. And in that role, we've got a couple people here at Novia that are licensing specialists. We're often asked by Microsoft to help customers that that need advice, need to become compliant, etc. So I'm one of the guys that have sat through that exam to know all the ins and outs of licensing, and even I struggle at times. So who is Innovia? Real quick, we are an award-winning consulting firm, 30 plus years in business, 50 plus team members, and we're kind of located primarily in the Midwest, but we go as far south as Texas and as far east as Rhode Island. So that's who we are. Here's a list of some customers we help. We are specialists in the Dynamics NAV space, but obviously we've got expertise in Microsoft Classic licensing as well. So so these are some of our customers that we've helped. Maybe you recognize them, and maybe some of these customers are on the call today. So let's get down to the basics here. What is software asset management? If you ask a lot of people, they've got the feeling that it's Big Brother watching them. When it comes to licensing compliance, there is this this feeling that it is a Big Brother type interaction, that sort of like an IRS audit, like, okay, you've provided us with some information, but we just want to double check it. That sometimes comes with a perception that that there's a lack of trust maybe, and really that isn't the case. I'm going to go through some of Microsoft provided information about some red flags, if you will, or not even, I guess, because red flags has a negative connotation as well, but more just why does, what are some things that could potentially lead to make you a good target for a licensing audit. So really, software asset management is global industry standard. So it's not something that Microsoft developed on their own. Certainly it's endorsed by Microsoft as one of the largest, if not the largest, software providers on the planet. But it comes outside of Microsoft. It is bigger than Microsoft, and to the point where it's defined in the ITIL library. Basically, SAM is an integral part of the control framework for any well-run organization. And if you are ISO 9001 compliance, standards will always require that you've got a good idea of what you have, and essentially that software asset management is just that. Simply put, you are identifying and managing your software assets. So it's important, I guess, to know that it is outside of Microsoft. It's bigger than Microsoft. So basically, the interesting way that Microsoft positions software asset management is as a tool to help enable your company and increase productivity, etc. So some of the ways that Microsoft suggests this tool can be leveraged would be controlling costs, risks, and complexity, optimizing software assets. I guess what they're getting at there is the fact that if you know what you have, that gives you, of course, a better ability to leverage the software, to deploy it, to maximize the investment. As you start to look at cloud platforms and you look at the cool new things you can do with Excel 2016 that maybe you couldn't do in Excel 2010, any of the Office products, you start to wonder, oh, well, that would be great if we could do that in our organization. Well, then it turns out you look at your software asset management list and hey, we've got a volume license agreement. We're entitled to that latest and greatest. Why aren't we using that now? That could really help our accounts payable department or whatever it is. So the idea that if you know what you have, it benefits you as a business, I think is pretty straightforward. Growing the infrastructure to meet your needs. If you are constantly running into people getting bumped off the server or bumped off a certain application, like maybe Dynamics NAV, that you need to add some licenses. You've got you look at your license count and you see that you've got 25 licenses, but you've got 30 users that are constantly fighting for those 25. That isn't to say that you're out of compliance necessarily, because depending on the licensing of that specific application, you might be okay. If they're named users or they're concurrent users, you might be okay with 30 users and 25 seats, but is that right for your organization? I mean, is that what you want? If you're leveraging the software, you probably want everyone that needs to use it to have access to it. So it's those sorts of ideas, I guess, that Microsoft's hoping to get in front of people and to see this not just as an audit, but as a strategic part of your IT investment in analyzing at all times what do we own and what do we need. So again, last bullet point on this slide about extending the benefits across multiple departments. If you're like most organizations, there's a certain amount of siloing that happens. Maybe the sales department lives in a bubble to a certain extent and isn't aware, certainly from a software standpoint, about what other divisions in the organization own or are using, and so getting a holistic view of what your organization owns sometimes breaks down some of those barriers. So the important question about which customers does Microsoft engage with? This here is a statement right from Microsoft. A review of volume licensing customers as a standard business process. So it's in a lot of cases it's just a Microsoft process that gets you on their list. It isn't necessarily that you've got any red flags within your organization. So it's important to understand that, and that you're a lot of times not being picked out for any specific reason. It's just that this is part of Microsoft's process now. But specifically, some of the engagement factors, I guess this was important to me, that the leading, I guess, engagement factors, U.S. headquartered organizations, obviously easier for Microsoft to drive compliance within the borders of the United States. Of course, that isn't the only place that they enforce, but that is primarily where they are engaging active volume licensing agreements. So that's interesting. If you've got a volume licensing agreement that is active, that's something that they want to engage with, and that comes from the standpoint of not so much an audit type of compliance, but of maybe helping you realize the benefits that your active volume licensing agreement is giving you as an organization, and how you can leverage those to actually see the value. So as you go through an audit, it's like, okay, well, you've got multiple users that are interacting on multiple devices, phones, tablets, laptops, desktops. Because you've got a volume licensing copy of this software, you're covered by it, whereas if you had maybe a retail OEM copy of something like Office, you'd need a specific a single copy for each instance there. So part of that seeing value in the licensing that you already own is probably why they are looking after the active volume licensing agreement customers. The 75 to 250 seat space is their hotspot. That is where they see the most value in requesting these management reviews. But that isn't to say we have worked with a lot of customers that fall below that 75 seat mark, and so again, what gets you on their list is a mix of these things. You don't have to fit every profile here. Some risk assessment, that is a Microsoft term, so what that means is I guess unclear to me specifically, but obviously it counts with a large number of desktops, and that's important, and accounts that have gone through mergers, acquisitions, divestitures, those where there's a question as to who owns the licensing, what happened to the existing license, are you, properly licensed, if you're licensed in a company-wide manner on certain products, how is that affected? So certainly those are challenging times for licensing understanding, and so that's where Microsoft feels a management review of your license or your software assets would be beneficial. So, and then there are, as part of, for our volume license customers, they're familiar with this. For those that aren't, this is new, but the true-up report is a requirement under most volume licensing agreements. So especially subscription models, they will ask you at the time of renewal, have things changed, have numbers gone up or down depending on the licensing model you're in. Like for subscription, open value subscription, you can go, you can true up or true down. Other volume license agreements only allow you to true up, but that report is something that Microsoft isn't stupid, and they know that the fact that you entered into a 3-year agreement, odds are from year to year the number of users in your organization is going to change, so they send out these reports, and it's if you don't respond to those reports, that's a red flag sort of alert to them. So these are the engagement factors. Again, it's a mix of these, and we have worked with customers that don't really meet any of these and still get a management review requested. So maybe they're just special, but it's as I said at the beginning, this is a big point for Microsoft. This compliance has become very important, and for a lot of good reasons. So this is something that hopefully provides some comfort to you that the fact that there are 3 types of software audits from Microsoft, and the only ones that that I guess we have been asked to participate in or help with so far has been the first one, which is the Microsoft internal self-audit letter/email. That comes to you as a very innocent-looking email, but really they're just asking you to complete a form. So this is the most common audit type. Microsoft asks companies to verify compliance by executing a self-audit by a specific date. Typically, it reads something like, the purpose of the internal self-audit is to allow the parties to update the number of licenses granted under the agreement. Please be advised that any removal of Microsoft software currently in use across your enterprise as of the date of your receipt of this notice in order to comply with existing contracted number of licenses will be considered a violation of the terms of the agreement. An example of self-certification email has been provided below for your convenience. So you'll typically be required to provide evidence of your compliance by sending them software keys you have, which they will compare with their records. If you've received one of these letters or emails, then you have been through the process, but again, it is completely self-driven. So Microsoft is asking you to provide the information to them. They are not going in and checking their records and saying that we've got this listed for you, and they're ultimately they're asking you to do the work. So it can be fairly time-consuming, but again, it's important because there are benefits to your organization with being compliant. The second type of audit is a Microsoft SAM engagement. So again, a SAM engagement is a voluntary process, but this SAM engagement is more collaborative. It doesn't just rely on you. Microsoft will bring in a SAM partner, which is in their eyes a value-added service, and effectively they will help you. They will help you complete this information. So there are costs involved in a SAM engagement that Microsoft pays the cost of, so it doesn't cost your organization anything, but it's risen to the level that they think most likely you would benefit from some help from one of their SAM partners, and it's probably a little bit bigger potential for some non-compliance when it reaches that level. So that's the second type, and then the third and final type is if you notice the word legal there, the Microsoft Legal Contracts and Compliance Audit, and that's most likely when you're going to want to get your lawyers involved. That is the most severe, the most serious, I should say, of the 3 types of audits. Basically, what gets you there is if you decline either a self-audit request or a SAM engagement, because those are voluntary, you can simply say, no thanks, we're way too busy, our IT staff, and actually I've helped customers draft those emails and send them to Microsoft for legitimate reasons. Your IT staff is strained with a new implementation. They send you the self-audit emails come with a requested date, like we would like you to get back to us by, and it's typically like 60 days out. But if that is just unrealistic, you get back to them right away and say, I'm sorry, we've got a lot going. I can't get to you by this date, but I can do it by this date. I've never seen Microsoft say no to any of those sorts of agreements, but if you just ignore those requests, eventually they will request a legal contracts and compliance audit, and then they look at areas of non-compliance where they can actually take assertive legal action against you beyond the fact that they are not going to give you any sort of understanding based on their findings. They're gonna kind of come at it from a more I guess punitive angle after you've ignored several requests. So as long as you are only receiving a self-audit request or potentially a SAM engagement, you're still in a pretty good spot with Microsoft, but you don't want to get to the legal contracts and compliance space with them. So the challenge that that a lot of organizations run into, and you know, how do you kind of get out of compliance? Most of the time, it's just that companies lack the resources to strategically plan and support their long-term technology needs. It's more a you know, looking at a short-term deployment and you know, you need you've got a couple, you're going to add 3 new users, and so IT says, okay, we got to get these guys computers. Oh, you know, they're going to need Office. Well, let's see, I'll just order that from my reseller I'm getting the computers from, and then what's the cheapest way I can buy it? Okay, it's OEM, it's pre-installed image, and then you don't realize, because you're not because it's kind of always a fire drill, you're not taking the long-term view of, okay, if I buy a volume license copy of the software, of the OS and the productivity suite, Microsoft Office, I'm going to be covered, you know, should this equipment die, or should this user migrate to different equipment. Maybe their computer gets put into the on the production floor where they don't need some of that, like Office software, for instance, and then can you move that? So it's, you know, this continual short-term reaction to the software needs rather than a holistic long-term view where you start to see the value of things like volume license. So so again, focusing on short-term savings, the OEM software is less expensive than volume license, but the reason for that is that you get less user rights. You know, migrating the software, having users have multiple copies for a single user, those sorts of things are not included in the retail versions of most Microsoft products, but they are included in a lot of the volume licensing scenarios. So so it just, you know, it happens. It happens to a lot of organizations where things just get out of hand, and as things continue, after 2 or 3 years of adding a couple users here and there and buying some software, you get the feeling that you've spent several $1,000s on Microsoft software. You certainly should be compliant, but then you get in front of one of these audits and you find out what's involved, and sometimes we find that getting out of hand with retail short-term purchases it leads you to be non-compliant. So we're going to talk about what maybe a little bit of suggestions on what you can do, but some of the other pitfalls, I guess, purchasing from multiple vendors. So you know, this time you bought from CDW, last time you bought from Best Buy or some other online retailer, and so you don't have, these people don't know, or maybe you've got a volume licensing agreement in place on some of your software, but you think, oh, you know, I think it seemed to me it was really expensive to add a seat of volume license, so I'm just going to pick up an OEM copy, and then you start getting a mix of these different software keys that exist within the different versions that exist within your organization, and then challenges occur because you've got a certain group that maybe the accounting team wants the latest and greatest version of Excel, but they're not licensed for it, but you do have some volume license copies floating around, and those users are entitled to the newest one, but you know, how do you make sense of who's using what, and do you go through the trouble of recording which keys are used where and how many times they've been activated? Certainly that's an advantage of volume licensing, because you can manage the agreements from the volume licensing website. It shows you the number of activations, the keys, it gives you all that. But if you're using OEM versions of the software, you've got no ability to see into that, and that's you'll find out becomes very challenging when it comes to the audit process, because in those scenarios Microsoft will ask you, they won't ask you to provide every key that you have, but we have had customers take pictures of the keys that for their operating systems on desktop or laptop computers. We've had and submit them as part of the Microsoft audit to prove that you do indeed own the licenses that you say you do. Having to provide receipts from purchase for OEM are things that typically 4 or 5 years ago, maybe hopefully you still have those receipts, but certainly they're going to be beneficial and almost a requirement to have them when you get audited if you've got a significant amount of OEM or retail licensing. So again, multiple vendors, decentralized purchasing, and that makes it difficult to keep track of, and an increased compliance risk. So, all right. So how does working with a single partner help? Obviously, if you try to work with one person, you're going to have or one organization, they should have a better view into your purchasing history. That shrinks the non-compliance risk, and also hopefully most importantly, gives you strategic insight into what should you be looking at, what benefits are there to the different volume licensing. Talking to a licensing specialist adds value throughout the process, not only from getting the most bang for your buck in the actual purchase, but also thinking forward as to what is your organization, if you've shared any of your business strategic goals with that licensing partner, they're going to be able to help you understand maybe even further above and beyond the value of the software, how strategically you can use the software within your organization and get the most out of it. So employee-driven scenarios, again, these are scenarios, challenging scenarios for compliance. You've got people in place that are not trained on the usage policies, or the usage policies simply don't exist within your organization. So if you give someone your volume license copy to install on their desktop computer, they may not know that they may or may not be entitled to install it on their personal laptop or bring it home and install it on their home computer. Those things are actually in a lot of volume licensing scenarios allowed, but there are a lot of scenarios where that isn't allowed. So if the employee doesn't know, that doesn't make them, I guess that doesn't excuse non-compliance. So the bring your own device scenario that I just went over is a big pitfall. Installation versus usage. So in a lot of cases, simply installing it but not using it is not acceptable in licensing terms. The fact that you install it creates a need for a license for it, whether you're using it or not. Sometimes that comes into play with standard images that get deployed across multiple machines. So maybe you've got 50 laptops out there and they all have the same image, and then you tell your users, hey, you're not licensed to use Microsoft Project, so you shouldn't open that. Maybe they listen, maybe they don't, but the fact that it's installed on there means that it requires a license. So, and then also the reassigning licenses. Sometimes companies spend too much money because they're rebuying OEM when they own some volume licensing, and maybe they should be reassigning. So it's not just that compliance is always going to cost you more. Sometimes compliance and understanding what you have means that you're going to get more out of it. Again, just a couple more, adding staffing augmentation, temporary employees. Are there ways that you can, leverage your licensing investment to take advantage of things like truing up and true down in between, where you don't necessarily have to buy a piece of software for every user, especially temporary employees. And thinking about that, getting those questions asked up front. Do you have seasonal employment? Oh, well, we're an accounting firm, so yes, we hire 10 to 12 people for the first quarter of the year, or the first 2 quarters of the year. Okay, well then you'd be great for open value subscription, because we can set up your agreement in a way that maximizes your value, and not having to add those temporary users in between your true up periods. So those are the kinds of things that licensing experts realize and should be asking you up front, that a retail establishment isn't going to know to ask you. So, and then there's people putting their own, we've seen this as well, where people understand or are familiar with coming from a different organization. Maybe they had the latest and greatest Microsoft Office versions available to them that then they're no longer available because your organization is on an older version, so they bring their own software from home and install it on their laptop. So maybe that's installed properly, or maybe it isn't. Probably it isn't, but you go through a software asset review, and they're going to find that out, and they're going to ask for the keys, and then ultimately the activation servers will tell them what they need to know, but they'll say, hey, you don't actually own this copy. Where did it come from? And that leads to some non-compliance issues. And so, in all these scenarios, the implications are that there's a high risk of non-compliance. There's a security concern about software and where it's being sourced from. If people are bringing their own software, how is that always genuine software? You've got the potential to overbuy, and then the intellectual property risk. So again, these are some of Microsoft's scenarios: inconsistent versioning, companion product inconsistencies, as I mentioned. Some of the Office suite, the basic suite comes with a certain software set. Then there's add-on companion products, and how are those licensed? Are they licensed properly? Product edition inconsistencies, so Office 2016, 2013, 2010. And then another big one is server and CAL inconsistencies. That's a big big call out for Microsoft if they see that you own an Exchange server license with 50 seats, and they're assuming you got 50 email users, but then maybe you've only got 30 copies of Office. They're thinking, well, what are those other 20 users using to connect the Exchange server? It may be that they're using the web interface, or but it's when they see groups of products that don't have where the numbers don't seem to match. You've got a high number of something relatively inexpensive like CALs, but you don't have the rest of the software to go with it. Maybe you have server CALs, but you don't have Exchange CALs, or you don't have enough seats of Office to cover the number of CALs within your organization, and and your Office product is licensed in a company-wide manner. Then those are some red flags. So so some of the ways to determine are you at risk or not, these are some good questions to ask. So number one, do you know how many PCs, laptops, and servers your company currently has in use? Seems like a pretty basic question, but if you're not the IT guy, if maybe you're the CFO, maybe you're the CEO, and ultimately that this asset management review reflects on your organization as a whole, not just the IT department. It's probably important to have an understanding of how many pieces, what's your hardware count, and then understanding if you've got software to cover all that. Like so before the audit even comes, let's start asking these questions to understand. Are you confident that no company employees have made unauthorized copies of your software? Is that a policy? Is that something that exists in your policy book? If not, that should be something that you think about. That having that in place at least gives you gives the auditors an idea that you are doing something, you are concerned about software compliance, and to the point where you're putting a policy in place. How you enforce that policy, again, sometimes that's tricky, but at least having a policy is a great first step. And then, did you acquire all your software installed on your devices from reputable sources? I can tell you that, and I'm a big fan of eBay in a lot of ways, but I will warn you that buying software on eBay is a risky business. We have had a lot of customers make that mistake, not so much recently because it's kind of got to a point where people accept the fact that eBay is just, in most cases, not a legitimate source of software if you're considering compliance. So we've had people invest thousands of dollars on, if you think you're buying $10,000 worth of software and you can buy it for $2,000 on eBay, something might be up. Now, will it install? Will it activate? In a lot of cases, yes. But usually what happens in those scenarios is that one of these merchants has got their hand on a volume license key that's got a whole bunch of activations available on it. They're selling it as if it is a normal key, and what happens, they resell that key so often that eventually the Microsoft activation servers realize it's not a valid key, and so even though it installs today and works okay, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days down the line, the software is going to stop working, and then you're going to have to pay the $10,000 up front. There's no way you're going to get that $2,000 back from that eBay vendor, so you've now just spent $12,000 on $10,000 worth of software. So reputable sources is important. And to be honest, even in that case, we have helped some customers who have bought from vendors that showed up on some Microsoft sites, as far as their website talks about how they are Microsoft partners, and they buy. We've had customers buy software, and then it turns out that the software is no good, and Microsoft can't help because they had nothing to do with the fact that someone created some fake keys, and you can't activate the software. So it's very important that you go with reputable sources. And then, as I said, having a written policy for copying or purchasing software. And we talked about the copying, but even the purchasing, like maybe it's something as simple as setting up an approved list of vendors, like we only buy our software from our Microsoft partner or CDW or Newegg. It doesn't have to be necessarily locked down, but if you have a list of a couple partners, at least your organization is aware of the fact that it's an important part of compliance that you buy from reputable vendors. So, now that we've talked about some of the challenges, what should you do, and what can you do to help make sure that if you do get audited, that you are compliant, or if you have been audited in the last 2 years, that you remain compliant? Certainly implementing policies and procedures around software is important. Employee training is an important part as well. Getting people to understand why it's important to be compliant and some of those risks associated with it. Even department heads that have budget where they can make their own purchases to a certain extent for some of the software that their group needs for your business. It's important to make those people aware of how you how to do it correctly, and in a lot of cases, licensing specialists are happy to work with upfront organizations to help lay out patterns of what makes sense and where you should go to where you should buy from, how you should buy, etc. So, and last but not least, cloud solutions. And cloud solutions, actually, that's an important part of Microsoft's mobile first, cloud first platform that they've been talking about for the last 2 years. But cloud solutions in licensing means that in most cases subscription, but in a lot of cases subscription licensing is is the most cost-effective way to cover a lot of these challenging scenarios. Cloud solutions oftentimes make it very easy for you to add to agreements. Self-provisioning, like you're on Office 365 and you hire 3 new people, you don't have to even call your partner necessarily and have them interact on your behalf. You can go to your admin portal on Office 365 and say, I need 3 seats, and these people are going to be using email and IM and Office, and so I'm going to get them on this E3 SKU, and you click it and it starts charging you by the month, and in most scenarios anyway, and you're off and running in 10 or 15 minutes of clicks, and the software is provisioned, and you know that they're covered on multiple devices, and they can do everything they need to. In the same way, if you end up having a division of yours gets bought out, and you have 10 users that no longer need the software, and you're on a subscription based, you can most likely go in and just take those 10 licenses away and have next month's bill reflect that. So there's a lot of flexibility around cloud, and there's a lot of power in cloud licensing because of that flexibility. So that would be something that we would recommend that you take a look at. And the other important factors as to versions versus editions, when Microsoft software gets combined with other third-party solutions, how does that affect if you have an application that is going into SQL and pulling out data? Does that require a SQL license for all of the users of that software? It's important to understand from that third-party vendor what their opinion is, but then also depending on how confident you are in them as a vendor, how long you've known them, it's also important to check with a licensing specialist. Sometimes checking with Microsoft maybe to get their opinion on what how that software should interact and how it should be licensed. There's all kinds of, when you get to SharePoint and external connectors, and all these things can be kind of confusing, but there are experts out there. Microsoft relies on us as partners to be experts and advocates on behalf of the end users of the software ultimately. And one of the reasons that Microsoft